Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Natasha, and of course I'm from Phenixology Bath and Body. Check the shirt out. So the last few videos that I've created, we've talked about making candles, how to choose your percentage fragrance oil to match your wax that you're using, as well as how to choose the correct wick according to the amount of fragrance load that you're using, the wax you're using, the diameter of your container, and whether you're adding any additives or anything such as maybe you want to increase your fragrance load, or maybe you're adding dye. And as we mentioned before, those things affect how your candle burn. Now, I know candle making is not as easy as a lot of people think or thought that it was. In essence, it can become very frustrating. It can be time consuming as well. And you sometimes spend a lot of time in the beginning wasting a lot of products. It is expensive. It can become, a little of an expense. So if you've gotten to the point where you're sick and tired of testing wicks, and no matter what you do, you cannot get your candle to burn right, you can take a moment, pivot a little bit. And this is what I did in the beginning of my business. I did some additional research because for a moment there in the beginning, I was testing and testing and testing, and it just was not happening right. So instead of me giving up, I decided to see what else I can do. And I came across wickless candles. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term wickless candles, it's exactly what the name is. It's a candle that does not require a wick to give off the fragrance or to burn. What you use with a wickless candle is a container, and it could be glass or metal. I prefer metal because of the conduction reasons. I think metal evenly melts everything and it gives off a better fragrance, but that's just me. You can use glass. I use metal. And what you're doing is you're making the candle, but you're not adding that wick. And how this burns is that you need a plate or a warmer. You sit it on that plate when it heats up, and it still melts the wax. It still melts the wax, and it still gives off the fragrance. So there is a market for that. Just because you can't find the wick, take a moment, pivot, try something else, and then you could come back and go back to making candles with wicks. So this actually is great because when I make my wickless candles, it allows me to be very flexible. I add more fragrance oil. As you can see, I add dried fruits. I add little specks of flowers. I even add glitter at times with my wickless candles. I add dry flowers with some of my wickless candles. I add colors, and guess what? It still does not affect how my wickless candle burns. If you have customers that are on oxygen tanks or are in a location that they cannot use an open flame or cannot burn anything, they can use this along with a candle warmer and still get the fragrance of a regular candle. So think of it as an advanced wax melt. It's just burning in a container just like a regular wax melt, and you still get that fragrance. Okay? So on my did I just smack? Sorry. On my website, I sell these as a set. I have the candle warmer and I have the wickless candle as a set. I also sell it separate as well. A lot of customers still aren't familiar with what a wickless candle is, so I try to promote it a little bit more, and it started catching on after a while. And you have people who are afraid to light candles because you hear the stories of, a lot of things happening sometimes because maybe someone did not care for their candle correctly and a fire occurs. So you have people who are not interested in burning a candle, and you could promote this as a substitute for them. So to make this, you make it the same way as you would your regular candle. You melt your wax. You do your fragrance load, the percentage according to how much you want it to be. You can actually play loosely with it. You can add fragrances. You could increase your fragrance load. You can also add dyes. You can add dried stuff. Now, I still say be cautious when you're adding your dried fruits and your flowers and all of that, because I am a strong believer where there's heat, there's a potential for fire. So I always tell my customers, when you get down to the bottom, there's a little bit left, don't burn it with that flower in there. Now, customers don't listen to instructions, but I've tested it and I haven't had an incident where, regardless if there's a lot of wax in there or not, does it catch on fire? No. Now, the container could overheat. It could also get, scorch marks at the bottom. So you also want to mention them to be cautious with letting it sit on for too long. So these actually do not need to burn long. You can burn them until you get the smell that you want. So it can take maybe 5 minutes and the room smells as strong as they want it to. They could turn off the warmer and then let it go. Once this cools down, all they need to do is replace the cover and save it for the next time that they're ready to burn it. The more they replace the cover, it extends the life of the wickless candle. So I went ahead to save some time and I melted down my wax, and I'm going to go ahead and let me get the container for you, and I'm going to mix in my fragrance oil. So as usual, we're going to go ahead and we're going to zero out our scale. So on here right now, my scale is saying 0. And I'm going to add my wax that's already melted. I'm not going to make a lot today because I don't need a lot of this particular fragrance, but I mainly just wanted to show you how this works. All right, so I'm pouring the melted wax into my pot, and I'm going to put it back on the scale, and I got the amount that I want. Okay. Okay, so now that I've had the amount that's in my container, and I'm going to go ahead and do my conversion and do my math as we did before: percentage of fragrance oil, amount of wax, so on and so forth. So we're going to take a look at that. All right. Okay, so I'm going to do maybe about, I'll say about 3 ounces of fragrance oil for this one right here. And I can actually do 4 if I wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead and place my container. I use a glass container. I'm going to place it on a scale, zero it out, make sure I could zero that out. And I'm going to take my fragrance oil and pour it into the container. Remember, we're measuring our fragrance oil according to the weight. We're not measuring it to the size of the container that you're pouring it into. We're measuring it according to the weight. Okay, so we're going to pour the fragrance oil in here. And now I'm going to take a spoon and I'll go ahead and mix this fragrance oil into my container. So here's my container right here. As I mentioned before, easy to do this. I'll include the links of where I got my containers from. I got this candle warmer from Amazon. So that was also easy to purchase. And you include the price of your item, your candle warmer, in the total price of your package. So you're not losing any money. These come with really nice packages and covers. And I created a label. And I went ahead and put it on there. And it has the warning, my logo, the name of the candle that I'm making, and I placed that on there. So let me continue mixing it. You know, you mix it the same amount of time that you mix that regular candle. You mix it according to about 2 minutes. I don't do the full 2 minutes a lot of times, but I prefer when I take the time to do it, because you're trying to bind that fragrance oil with your wax. That way, as it starts melting, it's still combined. And if it's not combined correctly, if a little heat touches it, it's going to separate the fragrance oil from the wax. And that's why a lot of times that can also cause your candle to sweat, because the fragrance oil is not binded to the wax correctly. Now, of course, using too much fragrance oil will also lead to your candle sweating. But if it's binded correctly, you'll have a higher chance of it not separating. So I'm just mixing it together. I don't add my components like my dried fruits and my flowers and everything until the candle is almost cooled and the top layer has a film over it, like a solid film. But you can't wait until it's too solid, because then you'll have to basically, you know, use a heat gun, and make a little bit of liquid on the top. So I wait just before it gets fully hard and it's fully set, where it's still liquidy. It sits on the top, because you don't want to do it too soon, because anything you add will sink to the bottom. And the other thing you can do as well is wait until the candle completely hardens, and then use a glue gun. I keep saying glue gun, but use a heat gun and melt the top a little bit, a light top layer, and then put your components on there. But I like to put my fruits and anything that I add to my wickless candle, I like to put it in when it's not as hard, because I want it to get into the wax more. Okay, and that helps when you're shipping it. You don't want it to dislodge from the candle, and then your customer opens the container and all your dried fruits and your leaves and whatever else you're putting in there falls out of the container. So I usually try to put it in where it's still on top of the candle, but it's wedged within the wax itself when it cools down. So that's why I add mine before it gets to the point where the top is completely solid. All right, so we're almost ready here to go ahead and mix. So the other thing that I love about wickless candles, you don't have to think about air bubbles as much, okay? Because with a candle, when it burns, you'll see the wax as it hardens come back up, and you can see the burn circle and everything like that. With the wickless candle, the heat is in the container or filling up the container itself, so the whole container is melting. So whatever way it melts, once it solidifies, is back to, you know, the original, not really the original form, but it's back solid, and you don't have to worry whether it burned correctly the first time. And remember, we talked about it with using the wick. That first burn is very important. Wickless candle, it doesn't matter if they burn it for 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It will still burn correctly, and it will still give off the fragrance that they're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and pour mine in there, the fragrance in there. You guys, I am stumbling today while talking. And then I'm going to fill it up. So I want to leave room for when the cover goes on, that it will sit properly in there. So I fill it up almost to the curve of the container. And here it is right here. And we may have room for one more. So let's get that one more container. Oh, yes, this is perfect, you guys. I'm glad. Because I did not want to have extra left over. So I just fill it in there. So, as I mentioned before, I'm getting ready to get off. But, I don't know if you can see it. Only thing that's missing is the wick. So, thank you for watching. Don't give up with the candle making. Just go ahead and pivot and do something different. I've seen some stores that they only make the wax melts. I've seen some stores that they only focus on wax tarts or pieces of wax bits, like wax crumbles. So you just have to find an area for you to make it your base. And then that way you can still sell the products that you want to sell. It doesn't necessarily have to have a wick. Everyone does candles with wick. But you can do a wickless candle store if you want to. Or you can do wickless candles and wax melts. And that will be your focus for your candle. You just have to pick something and then you build from that. Okay, so thank you for watching. As usual, I'm going to include the links in the description of the video. And I'll see you next time.